Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even...
He was told that we need Greenland for national security purposes. He's been told that for a long time. If you remember, he floated this idea of buying Greenland in 2019, like fucking Louisiana purchase it.
I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they
That's not true.
should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world. You look at...
What the fuck does that mean? I'm going to come back to that.
You don't even need binoculars. You look outside, you have China ships all over the place. You have Russian ships all over the place. We're not letting that happen. We're not letting it happen.
What the fuck?
And if Denmark wants to get to a conclusion, but nobody knows if they even have any right, title, or interest. The people are going to probably vote for independence or to come into the United States. But if they did do that, then I would tariff Denmark at a very high level.
U.S. foreign policy is far more imperial than I think the Biden administration would like to recognize, or that the Obama administration would have liked to recognize. It's easier to see it when it's under Trump. It's easier to see it when Trump does it because he's very mask off about it. And everything that Trump has muttered and uttered, and all of the staff around him, the MAGA cadre who are starting to slot into the various political appointments, everything that they're talking about is being extra about imperialism. When you're not treating America as empire as an epithet, and you mean it analytically, you're like looking for certain things, and when you see those attributes, then you call it out, and that has certain implications for how the world works and what we expect of U.S. foreign policy. America has imperial relations with certain parts of the world, and it's hegemonic at a global level. Obviously, the capitalist world system works foremost to the benefit of America, and more narrowly, like America's ruling class. That's super damning of, ironically, Biden's foreign policy. So Biden's foreign policy is primacist, and that primarily foregrounds China. That's actually what justifies America not relinquishing its sphere of influence and its territorial control of actual existing colonies in the Pacific Islands region. Everything that's dark and sucky about Asia kind of hangs on this notion of great power competition. This is the rhetorical framework that the Biden guys use, and it justifies a lot of choices that you would also see under an imperialist foreign policy. But there are things new when Trump is being extra about it, when Trump is being mask off about it. He's clearly being surrounded with what we would call as just like hawks or militarists or jingos, but actually there's a bunch of them who are fucking geopoliticians. And an imperialist foreign policy is a policy of land grabs. And that can take different forms.
$60 trillion worth of assets. We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Did you hear about this? The Gulf of America? We're going to unilaterally change the name of the Gulf of Mexico.
Which is a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country.
This Gulf of America thing, it rings of a more overtly selfish version of the greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere of Imperial Japan, the grand geographic construct that subsumes the territories and the sovereignties of others, but we put a nice sheen on it. At least with Imperial Japan, it was like, hey, this is a collective thing. Y'all are part of this. Y'all, East Asia, yes, we're colonizing you and shit, but we're a family, you know? There ain't no family part in the Trump version. You know, the Gulf of America is like, gimme, gimme, gimme. You know, America want. For Greenland, for the Panama Canal, and for Taiwan, all three of these places, there's a way of thinking. It has a directly imperialist, as in 19th century imperialist genealogy. It's a classical geopolitics. It erases people, and it assumes that the only civilization is white and Western. and it conceptualizes the world as places that offer advantage because of resources that you can extract or because they are useful for prosecuting a war. And so if there is a particular geography that is useful in a worst case scenario of war, or if you can fucking loot and plunder it, then they become quote unquote strategically important. And it's these darkly creative fucks who look and stare real hard at the map, like a map of the world, and they come up with stories that they can tell based on what the map looks like. And so these three locations are conceived of as quote unquote strategic choke points. And so this whole like language and logic of thinking in terms of strategic choke points, they're like, can't have China shutting down the Panama Canal because then in a war, it's going to take us like 10 extra weeks to get forces to Asia, or it would shut down our ability to do trade. But that is laughable. China has no ability. China doesn't control the Panama Canal, first of all, but China has no ability to shut it down or to lock it down or to control it. And China doesn't have an ability to project force all the way to Latin America. That is like geographically America's backyard. America's power projection advantage is way beyond China's. If China wanted to try and shut down the Panama Canal, America would be able to resolve that by force fairly quickly and decisively. And so what is the desire to control it? Well, it's these stories that the geopoliticians tell about choke points. But all that is conjuring up imagery of worst case scenarios where we get quote unquote strategic advantages in a war by already controlling it. But those are imaginaries and alternative futures where everybody loses, nobody wins, except for the people who are in charge of resources, except for a ruling class few. You're going to start seeing people saying this more and more because classical geopolitics is a coherent logic on its own terms. It's just a dark logic that is morally vacuous and that justifies, the worst of humanity. It's a justification framework for reactionary imperialist politics. Classical geopolitics is imperialism. And so when we see them talking in the language of geopolitics, like, we have to recognize that is an imperialist language. That's an imperialist design. And that's how Greenland relates to the Panama Canal, relates to Taiwan. The pattern is so evident with Trumperialism, right? An erasure of already existing colonial relations under Biden with Puerto Rico and with several Pacific Island nations. We have this land grab tactic, whether it's through purchase, possibly in the case of Greenland, or through dispossession, which is what the senators are talking about with Panama, right? We have the threat of forced assimilation with Canada and Mexico, where Trump wants to make them the 51st state, which is ultimately like imposing foreign rule from a distant capital. We're dictating to more than 40% of the world's population with the BRICS currency tariff threat that Trump issued a week ago. Trump is already setting up rent-seeking arrangements from allies, NATO, South Korea, Japan. He wants payments from them, but he also wants to remove troops from those areas, which I'm not necessarily mad at, actually. But it's the rent-seeking, it's the rendering allies from being equals to being protectorates that is overtly imperial, right? And then the final attribute of imperialism, sphere of influence arrangements with the great powers, right? With China, with Russia, and with Turkey, he has signaled coming to terms that would come at the expense of others, with Ukraine, with Taiwan, Hong Kong, with Syria, where he said Turkey already controls most of Syria. So this is Trumperialism, friends.